Hi, I'm Caden here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have our NFL Week 2 recap, recapping an absolutely insane week that included the most games that will be played at one time all season, with the noon window this week having 10 games in it, which, let me tell you, there were so many good games within that 10 games as well. It was
Really
absolutely amazing to watch. If any of you watch Red Zone, it might have been the most fun I've had watching Red Zone in the past 3-4 years since I've been watching it. It was absolutely wild. Great week of football all around. So before we jump into some of those great games, just a few kind of news bits to start off here. A couple of really big injuries for big name players, starting with Christian McCaffrey, who you already knew was out last week but was put on IR this week. So we'll miss at least through week 5 with that 4-week window. Some other guys who will now be missing is Isaiah Pacheco. The Chiefs running backs will be out 6 weeks with a
fractured fibula.
I knew it was a fractured bone, but I
Yep.
can't remember which one. And then a couple of big name receivers that will be out for an indefinite time in Cooper Kupp, who has not yet been placed on IR, but it's looking like might be, and Deebo Samuels, who will be out at least a couple of weeks, according to reports. So really big players left and right being out right there. So we'll see how that kind of affects the game speed and everything around the NFL. But a big switch up that's not due to injury, but due to a bad play. The Panthers have named Andy Dalton as their starting quarterback for week 3 as well. So the Bryce Young experiment goes down in a ball of flames, to say the least, very quickly. I mean, if Andy Dalton goes out and does poorly as well, I could easily see them throwing Bryce Young back in and just being like, you were our first overall pick. You got we showed that we're not afraid to bench you when you play bad. You better play better, I guess, is what they could kind of tell him if Dalton goes out there and does poorly. But we'll have to see how that affects the Panthers and Carolina in general in the long run. So now jumping into some of those exciting aforementioned games, starting with the Packers game of the Indianapolis Colts heading to Green Bay to take on the Packers in their first week without Jordan Love. And the Packers pick up a Malik Willis win by a score of 16-10.
Yeah, and I did. I'm not gonna lie. I picked the Colts last week, not kind of in a panic. I really didn't think Malik Willis was gonna do that well, but I'm glad I was wrong. And he actually did okay. He managed the game like he should. He made the throws he had to make. He didn't have to make any extracurricular throws. No deep throws, no really hard, sidearms or anything like that. They were just basic routes and basic throws, and a couple of really nice throws on some out routes caught by Dontavian Wicks, who was this week's Green Bay Packer receiver to step up. So we'll see how many weeks that changes. I said last time that could change every week. But Malik Willis actually did play pretty darn well for given the amount of time he had to get ready. He's only been there less than 4 weeks, so this will be his 4th week now. So I don't know how long it can continue, because the big thing was the running game with 32 carries by Josh Jacobs, 47 total carries by running backs and quarterbacks altogether for over 250 yards rushing, and 150 of it by Josh Jacobs, who really was the player of the game, who probably should have had a couple of touchdowns, if not for a fumble at the goal line. So can't be having that happen too often. We got away with one there because we should have been able to put it away early. But nonetheless, we were able to pull away and keep the Colts at bay with no big plays over 25 yards. Jonathan Taylor did run over 100 yards, but we were able to keep him out of the end zone. And, the Packers were able to pull this one out just by the skin of their teeth.
Yeah, definitely. The big one here is really the defense. I mean, when you have that much, we'll say, going on with your offense and that much change in your offense, you really need the defense to step up. And if they don't do that and your offense has to kind of play from behind and try to carry the load, it's just not going to work. But luckily for Malik Willis and this Packers offense this week, they didn't have to, because the defense showed up from the start. They played really well. Even when the offense put them in far from ideal situations, they were still able to kind of regain themselves and hold the Colts to kind of a bend don't break style, and only allowed 10 total points, even with things like that Josh Jacobs fumble at the goal line. That was pretty game changing. But yeah, as Callan kind of mentioned, one big thing I wanted to point out was Malik Willis made some throws that impressed me. Like, not like wow, jaw-dropping throws, but just things that you don't, or I shouldn't say don't, but haven't really seen from him in his time in Tennessee and his time playing. The big one being that out route to Dontavian Wicks for the touchdown. I mean, if that one was thrown anywhere but exactly where he put it, it's probably a pick six by Kenny Moore. But instead he puts it right on the money. Kenny Moore bites on the dive, and it makes pretty much a walk-in touchdown for Dontavian Wicks. And football's a game of inches. So when you can be that precise and be within those inches, that's really good stuff. So I don't think it holds up. I think that now that they have a week of film on him and a week of knowing what the Packers offense is going to be and not having the ambiguity, I think that they kind of get figured out. But nonetheless, they're able to sneak out a win without their starting quarterback. And anytime you can do that, that's really a positive. I mean, look at the Vikings last year. After losing Kirk Cousins, we were actually in the playoff race for a while because we were able to sneak out 2-3 wins from Josh Dobbs before the Pasternaut all fell apart. But I mean, that was a fun time because it's like, holy crap, here we are, and there's still playoff chances. So a little earlier in the season for the Packers than it was last year for the Vikings, but nonetheless, good stuff overall.
And one thing about the defense, they had 3 interceptions and have 5 interceptions on the year already. The Green Bay Packers only had 7 interceptions all last year.
That's pretty
good.
So
they're already at 5 through 2 weeks. So definitely this defensive change seems to be making an impact.
Yeah, Xavier McKinney with a pick in each game, which is cool to see. When you pay a safety that much money to see him get the pick.
He is paying off early on.
Yeah, he's a good player. He definitely is. So now moving on to the other NFC North team we always talk about. We have the Minnesota Vikings in their home opener hosting the San Francisco 49ers and winning by a score of 23-17 at US Bank Stadium. A game, or I guess win, I should say, for lack of a better term, that we have been consistently doing since 1992. That meaning that the last time the San Francisco 49ers beat the Vikings in Minneapolis was in 1992, which is a pretty crazy stat overall that we've been able to do it for that long, especially because they've all been really close games. I mean, I didn't look too much into it. I just kind of scrolled through it, and almost every game was a one-possession game. So that's pretty cool to see for the Vikings. But to digress, they looked really good this game. I have been curbing my enthusiasm, trying to hold myself back because I was nervous going into the season. I always have high hopes just because why not be optimistic about it? But I did not expect the Vikings to look as good as they have so far. Yes, I understand Christian McCaffrey was not in the 49ers offense, but if you saw what Jordan Mason did to the Jets defense last week, you know that he's still a pretty damn good running back. And he got 100 yards, but that was mostly just because he got so many carries. And we really played against him really well, and that 49ers offense in general. The defense was I almost said they were the bigger question mark, but with the quarterback situation, they probably weren't the bigger question mark.
Second biggest.
But the Vikings as a team were just a pretty big question mark coming in, but they're firing on all cylinders. I mean, the defense has been shutting down some pretty good offenses. The offense has been playing so much better. I don't think it's that crazy right now to say Sam Darnold is one of the better performing quarterbacks in the league right now. If you look at it stat-wise, he really is. Some of the plays he made in the pressure situations more than anything really had me in awe this game. I mean, we were backed up against our own goal line after having all the momentum of just getting a stop on a 4th and goal on the 2-yard line. And Sam Darnold drops back 5 yards deep in the end zone. Everyone's thinking, oh my gosh, what are we doing? We're about to take a safety. We're going to lose all this momentum. But instead, in his own end zone, he throws a 50-yard dime to Justin Jefferson for a 97-yard touchdown. And I mean, it was a beautiful throw with the pocket collapsing around him. And then if you look at some of the things he did in the late game, when we had that final drive where we were only up by 6 and we needed to drive down and get the field goal in order to ice it. He made 3 huge third down conversions, including one absolute rope down the middle to Jalen Naylor on like a 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 12 or something like that. It was just really impressive stuff to see, and a lot of stuff that I didn't expect to see the Vikings do this year, and especially against a team like the 49ers. So will we sustain? There's the real big question mark now. That's what becomes the question mark. But as for now, the Vikings are rolling.
Yeah, this is a big win for the Vikings because the 49ers are thought of as one of the best teams, not only in NFC, but in the NFL, Super Bowl contenders. And when you beat a Super Bowl contender, you got to make that case for yourself. Does that make you a Super Bowl contender? Early on, it's hard to tell. You got to get through at least 3-4 weeks before you can really separate the contenders from the pretenders. But as far as this week went, really nice game for the Vikings. I didn't see much of it in person, watching because the Packers were on at the same time. But what I did see was the end of that Hail Mary, or not Hail Mary, but 50-yard end zone pass when Justin Jefferson ran up here, and he ran over here, and he ran back this way.
And then Jalen Naylor came from his crosser route all the way across to make the final block.
And you're right, so the teamwork there. But that was really entertaining in itself, just watching the end of that yards after catch or run after catch. That was very, very well done by Justin Jefferson. Another MVP-style performance by him, who went out late with a quad injury, but I believe he's only day-to-day.
I think he's expected to play next week.
It was a quad bruise. He got hit right in the quad with a helmet, which probably just hurt like an SOB, but yeah. I'm sure he'll be back. There's no worry of him missing.
I don't think
especially with Addison still reeling and missing. So is Addison going to play this week?
I'm actually not sure on that. I'll have to look into that. But one big, I'm happy you brought up the receivers, because one big thing I wanted to spotlight that I forgot to is the way Jalen Naylor has stepped up in the absence of Jordan Addison. I mean, at the start of the year, we had our top 2 with Jefferson and Addison. We were thinking, who's the number 3? And I was kind of thinking Brendan Powell. Some people were thinking Trent Sherfield, who we signed in the offseason. But Jalen Naylor, who we've had for a while now, I know he's out of Michigan State. I want to say he's a 2021 guy, if not maybe a 2022 guy. But he's really just made his way up the ladder and has continued to play really well. And he doesn't make a lot of catches. He's not a huge volume guy, but he's a huge team player doing things like running down the field in full effort, making blocks. And he makes a lot of big plays, like that touchdown we had in the red zone. So just the small stuff adding up from him, I've really loved to see. So when we get Addison back and have those true 2, and then that kind of like Tyler Boyd-esque almost team player, consistent guy, possession type guy, and Jalen Naylor, it's gonna be really cool to see what Sam Darnold can do with that. So now moving on to what we marked as our game of the week for our pick'em last week, we have the Cincinnati Bengals heading to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs, and the Chiefs picked up a win at home by a score of 26-25. Definitely a little controversy hanging around this one, as there is with pretty much all Chiefs wins nowadays. But I mean, I say that as a joke, but of course there's controversy when there is so much consistent controversy every time they win. But yeah, this one I don't think was quite as controversial, or I think it is a little overblown from what people are kind of making of it. But there was a huge defensive pass interference called on the Cincinnati Bengals pretty late in the game that all but put the Chiefs into field goal range, which allowed Harrison Butker to make the game-winning field goal. And it was certainly wishy-washy, but if you watch the replay, the safety got there early. There was no doubt about it. My huge gripe about it is the safety got there early, hit the receiver, the ball popped up in the air and hung in the air for a while. The ball finally hit the ground and fell incomplete, and then the flag happened. So there was like 3 to 4 seconds between when the early hit happened and when the flag was thrown, which that's just, even if it was early like it was, that's still, you hate to see stuff like that because it just makes it look bad. It makes it look controversial. So I won't get too far into that, but that's just kind of my thoughts on that. I sadly didn't get to watch much of this game at all. Just had some things going on in the afternoon and spent too much time watching all the noon games.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I was really impressed by what the Bengals were able to do keeping in the game, because after getting pretty well embarrassed at home last week by the Patriots the way they did, not by getting beat down, but just losing to a much lesser team in your home opener, I thought they might come out and still be reeling a little bit, but instead they were able to bounce back and play really well and go against one of the better teams in the league and go blow for blow with them. Probably should have won. There was a couple of different things, both on the officiating side of things and on them shooting themselves in the foot, that kind of held them back from really having a chance at winning it towards the end. But nonetheless, one of the better games of the week, or I should say at least closer games of the week score-wise, and looked like it was a really good game overall.
It really was a good game, and a much better game played by the Bengals, who were able to bounce back from that performance against the New England Patriots, who are looking a little bit better than people think.
Yeah.
We'll talk about them later on. But as far as the Bengals-Chiefs go, this game really came down to two major penalties. The one, the pass interference late, and then before that, Ja'Marr Chase got an unsportsmanlike conduct for arguing with the ref when the Bengals were in the red zone and knocked them out of the red zone and into only field goal range, where they had to settle for a field goal when really they should have had a touchdown, which would have put them up by enough or by much more. And instead they had to settle for the field goal. But really it was a good game overall by Joe Burrow, who was able to bounce back from his terrible performance. And really their big thing that I noticed was that they had a nice connection with the tight ends, who had the most yards for tight ends by a Bengal in history, or in team history, by Mike Gesicki, their lead tight end. And they had a couple other tight ends get involved, but you'd expect Ja'Marr Chase to be the big receiver to make the big plays but he was getting double and triple covered, because without T. Higgins, it's hard for them to really, or it's easier for them to focus more on Ja'Marr Chase. And one person that did step up was Andre Yoshavith.
I was going to say, I know who you're talking about, but I don't know how to say it either.
It's a very unique name. It's spelled with like an I to start, but it's spelled like Yoshavith. I think I'm saying that kind of correctly, but he had 2 touchdown receptions and shows that maybe he can be their new number 3 when T. Higgins comes back, just as with the emergence of Jalen Nailor for the Vikings. And it's funny because we compared these 2 wide receiver corps earlier this offseason when releasing our wide receiver rankings. They were very similar. And now, again, very similarly, finding their number 3.
Have the younger guys stepping up.
So it's interesting to see if that will carry on. And they also found a running game with Zach Moss and Chase Brown, who was able to really pound through that Chiefs defense even with Chris Jones. And they didn't make a huge impact, but they made enough of an impact that they were opened up the passing game, which is where the tight ends made an impact. And really, I thought the Bengals kind of deserved to win this game. The Chiefs kind of stole it from them late on, but that's how it goes. And really, if not for Ja'Marr Chase's, his breakout or freak out, the Bengals might have put this one away.
Yeah, definitely. It's the small stuff that matters. It really does. Keeping level-headed in the pressure situations.
Mm-hmm.
Hot take quick. I think that Joe Burrow is one of the most overrated quarterbacks in the league right now. Maybe he proves me wrong, but just these first 2 games, I have not loved what I've seen.
He looked better, but
he looked better, but just not what people act like he is.
Not when you have the weapons.
So we'll see if he proves me wrong. But moving on to the next game, we have what Callan marked as his game of the week with an NFC matchup, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading to Detroit to take on the Lions and stealing a win on a road with a Bucs win by a score of 20-16.
And this one starts off again with Baker Mayfield, who's slowly becoming one of the better quarterbacks in the league this year. And at least fantasy-wise, you want to talk about that, he's one of the top fantasy quarterbacks. So nice of him to be able to really get it together and really lead this team. He did well last season. People wonder if he could be consistent and continue and show that he's worth that contract extension. And I think early on, he's really paying the dividends.
Definitely.
He had a huge impact on this game, throwing and running. I believe he had a rushing touchdown and a passing touchdown. So those are big when you can do both of them. One person who kind of threw this game away for the Lions is Jared Goff, who was held touchdownless and had 2 killer interceptions.
Bad interceptions.
Really a bad one in the fourth quarter and one to lead off the game. So that was early momentum for the Buccaneers early on, for the defense to force an interception and show that those rookie corners that were really the cornerback room for the Buccaneers was very much injury ridden. So they had some newcomers coming in, and they really showed up and played well. Zion McCollum had one of those interceptions, and he's showing that he's really a good player in the NFL. But if not for Jared Goff's 2 interceptions, I think the Lions probably win this one. But that's how it goes, and the Lions just had too many turnovers to overcome, and Baker Mayfield was able to beat him.
Yeah, it is hard to overcome a negative turnover differential. It is one of the hardest things to do in football, is be negative in the turnover, especially -2 like they were, and still try to win a game. You can have a lot of talent, but if you just give the ball away like that, you can't do anything. You really can't. And the Lions proved that here by losing to the Bucs, even in Detroit. Baker Mayfield. It's just he's leading the league right now in passing touchdowns. I think he's leading the league right now in overall touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken, because he got that huge rushing touchdown late in the game as well. He's playing, we talk about hero ball a lot, and he's playing his brand of hero ball right now. And his brand of hero ball is just, I'm going to beat you, the pure competitor. I'm not going to beat you with strength. I'm not going to beat you with speed, but guess what? I'm going to find a way to beat you. And that's what he tells them, and he does it. He can back it up. It's been really fun watching Baker so far. If you would have told me at the start of the year the top 2 quarterbacks in the league through 2 weeks were going to be Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, and Derek Carr can be thrown in that list too as a shocker to, speaking of the Saints, or in the NFC South. But yeah, it's just been really fun to watch the Buccaneers so far. I love that you made the point about the young cornerback room, the injury-ridden cornerback room. Alex sent it out to the whole defense. That whole defense doesn't really have a ton of huge names, but they just play really well as a unit. They're able to force turnovers and make the big stops when they need them and give their offense the ball back when the offense needs the ball. It's just the small stuff that adds up, and the Buccaneers are really doing all the small stuff right now.
That's on coaching.
Big time. Yep. So now, finally, to wrap up this recap, we have my game of the week and a couple of other teams that are kind of shocker, really good teams this year. We have the Seattle Seahawks heading over to New England to take on the Patriots, and also stealing a win on the road by a score of 23-20. Now, to go all the way across the nation, true coast to coast, going from Washington all the way over there up into the other corner of New England, and winning on the road is really impressive overall, even if it was against a lesser team. But the Patriots have kind of shown this year that they're not quite as much of a lesser team as people thought heading into it. So that's why, more than anything, I wanted to talk about this game, is because both of these teams, I felt, especially the Seahawks, more the Seahawks and the Patriots, but I said were overrated going into the season, or underrated going into the season. And they've both kind of proven me right, showing that they are better than a lot of people are giving them credit for. DK Metcalf, after a very quiet week last week, kind of exploded on the scenes, having over 100 receiving yards, including a big broken play, 56-yard touchdown to get the things rolling for the Seattle Seahawks. But the Patriots were able to kind of take that blow and not stumble back too far. They were able to regain their feet. They were able to get back ahead of the game. And I think they might have even taken a small lead at one point there. But this one was really back and forth and really close throughout the entire game. Ended up going into overtime, of course. And the Seattle Seahawks were able to get a huge defensive stop and then drive far enough down the field to get a game-winning field goal. But I didn't get to watch a ton of this game, I'll be honest. But everything I saw of this game just looked like two teams really battling it out and really fighting for kind of their spot in each of their respective divisions and conferences overall, with this being an out-of-conference game. And I just love to see that when that kind of middle of the pack to lesser team shows up and plays better. Everyone loves an underdog story. So a hell of a game like this, with two underdogs facing each other, you don't even really care who wins. You're just happy to see a good game and happy to see one of them win. But the Seahawks are able to to steal the win in this one.
Yeah, and the Seahawks surprisingly are 2-0, which I wouldn't have thought, if you had asked me before the season. The Seahawks, I will say, are doing a little bit better than I thought they were going to. Geno Smith has proved to be, playing just well enough. He's not playing, superstar level, but he's not playing terrible either. He's not turning the ball over, which is huge. They did lose Kenneth Walker for a few weeks, but Zach Charbonnet was able to step in and prove that he's just as adequate as well to play that running back role. So it'll be nice for them when they do get Kenneth Walker back, with now Zach Charbonnet gaining some starting experience. And one thing I do know about this game is that the Patriots defense had a big impact on this, and was able to force Geno into a couple of turnovers, which I just said he hadn't been turning the ball over. He didn't turn the ball over last week, but they did turn it over this week. And that Patriots defense is a lot better than people think. They were one of the leading defenses last year, even though the Patriots had a losing record. And that's with Gerard Mayo leading that defensive coordinator room, who's now their head coach. So perhaps the Patriots will do better than we think. They seem to be playing much better as a team. They're kind of doing what they used to do with Brady, a bunch of nobodies, except this time the quarterback's a nobody. Brissett's not a household name. So they're doing it with guys like Jalen Polk, Demario Douglas, and Hunter Henry. So the Patriots tight end went over 100 yards. It was a big day for some of the tight ends around the NFL. So it'll be interesting to see how well the Patriots do next week, and if they're able to keep it up, and if the Seahawks are able to keep up this winning streak and keep proving me wrong.
Yeah, just like the Vikings, both of these teams have been playing well, but can they sustain? That's the big question mark. So that was our NFL Week 2 recap for the 2024 NFL season. Thank you all so much for watching this episode, and make sure you stay tuned in until next week for our Week 3 prediction episode. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.